Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 16, The Hunt begins too. He looked around the shop and admired the several colorful fabrics, from the finest silk to the soft-looking cotton fabrics to the gems like buttons and other clothes decoration he can name on top of his head. Suddenly, a wave of nostalgia hit him as the image of a woman with long brown hair sitting next to the window with a gentle smile on her face, knitting and enjoying this peaceful time while basking in the ray of light of the early morning sun. Her gentle and melodic voice hummed an all too familiar tune that never failed to calm his nerve and make him relax as he reads one of the books his stepmother have that told the story of a rouge mercenary who stole from the rich and gives to the poor. A gallant warrior that protects the weak from all the dangers of this world, a hero of legends and of yore that is immortalized in these pages. Did something caught your eyes, Circe? Sophia asked as she turned her eyes away from the fabric she is eyeing. Yes, he said as his eyes landed on a gray-colored cloak and his thought went to Byleth. The ash-colored cloak will do well with her dark teal-colored hair and her violet-colored eyes that sometimes took on a shade that reminds him of amethyst, and he reached out for a couple of garters and buttons in the same exact color of Byleth's eyes and hair. This one is pretty, he muttered as he matched the colors together, and just as he thought, they all go well together. Then, I will take this color then, Sophia said as she took the gray-colored linen and wool and some of the hemp and buttons he chose. Would your friend like these colors? He asked as he took out his coin purse to pay for Sophia's purchase. About that, Circe, Sophia said, looking away from him. I'm actually making it for you, she said. What? He asked, blinking in surprise. Really? He asked, quite flabbergasted. As a gift, Sophia said quickly, and as a thank you for always working hard and looking after me whenever you could, and as well as after the other nights, she said. We appreciate what you are doing for us, Sophia said. Well, he said, I was just doing my job, he said, and I just thought that since I have no family to go home to, then maybe I can take their shifts and let them go home to their families, he said, you know, to spend time with them and all, he said with a smile on his face. And Sophia didn't know how she can fall deeper in love with him, but somehow she is. So, how much was all of this? He asked the merchant for the price. Merchant looked back and forth between them. Well, for such a lovely couple, the merchant said, and for such a very kind knight, I will lower the price to 15 silver pieces, he said. Wait, he said, I don't think that's a fair price, he said in panic as he took out at least 50 gold pieces. No need for that, young lad. The merchant exclaimed happily, take it as a gift for when you two get married. He said. Wait. We are not dash, he said, blushing. No need to act so bashful. The merchant said with a hearty laugh, you have a very beautiful lady here. Makes this man jealous here. He said before letting out a hearty laugh. He just gave him the gold and grabbed their purchase before he took hold of Sophia's hand and led her away from the shop. Sorry about that, Miss Sophia, he said as he continued to lead her through the crowd a little more slowly this time. That was, he said, trying to find a word for how sorry he was that she was subjected to such an embarrassment in public. I don't really mind, Sophia said. Huh. He muttered softly. In fact, I would love the very idea of being your wife someday, Sophia said, looking away from him at the same time squeezing his hand. He blushed at that statement before another thought came into his mind. A pathetic man like you who can't even do his job right and have to be saved by the same person he is supposed to be protecting deserved a wonderful person such as her. Stop deluding yourself. You wouldn't want such a pathetic and weak husband, Miss Sophia, he said, but thank you for sparing a pity towards me even though I don't even deserve it, he said. Sophia is speechless at that. Is that why he is avoiding the archbishop lately? Because he thought that he is useless to the archbishop? Or was it because he felt insecure of the fact that the archbishop is stronger and better than him? But, no. She doesn't have the heart or the strength to tell him that the archbishop doesn't find him useless. In fact, she seems happy being by his side all the time. Sophia knows that she shouldn't be happy about this little misunderstanding, but she looked at the purple-haired man beside her as they navigate through the crowd. She just can't tell him since. Look out. A woman's voice said urgently. She is about to look up when she is promptly pulled into Shay's arms and into his warm and hard chest before a light. Are you okay, Miss Sophia? Shay asked gently while still holding the fallen post, their purchases, and her as though they weighed nothing. Why yes, she said as she draws closer to his chest, savoring the moment of being this close to him and to listen to the calming beat of his steady heartbeat, even if it's only for a measly fleeting moment. Are you two all right? The old woman asked as Shay steadied the post. Yes, Shay said, looking over her once more and nodding to himself upon seeing she is not hurt by that little but dangerous hurdle. No need to worry, ma'am. Shay said happily. The old woman gave a relief and happy laugh. But you such an impressive significant other there, young lady, the woman said with a slight giggle. He managed to catch you and protect you from the pole while holding the items you bought together, she said. Sophia smiled upon hearing that. Sir Shay is truly an impressive individual, and if only she knows the feat and the deeds he have done in the service of the Archbishop, and at the thought of the Archbishop, her smile disappeared, and it fell even more as she saw Shay's smile disappear with a forlorn look in his eyes. Well, the old woman said happily and oblivious to the turmoil in both of them. Take care now, you hear? The woman said. Shay gave her a smile and polite nod as they walk away from the sweet old lady. She looked at the purple-haired knight once more and was reminded. She already know, but the reality of it is just hard to swallow. Shay belongs to the Archbishop, and she wasn't saying in a possessive or employer kind. She meant that Shay's whole being revolves around the Archbishop just as the Archbishop revolves around him, whether they both know it or not, and she knows that this measly fleeting moment is the only moment she can have him wholly to herself. It's pathetic, but she can't ask more than this, lest she destroy what she built with him, no matter how small it was. How about we take a short break? Shay asked. Sure, she said. Then, how about this cafe? Shay said. Me and her Grace have been frequenting this cafe since I noticed that she loves the food there, he said with a soft smile on his face. Shay is saying something else about the Archbishop, but she didn't hear what he is saying anymore. All she knows is that the Archbishop will probably find any place a nice one and any food delicious if she is with Shay, but she will keep that to herself. Let her be selfish for once, let her keep this fleeting moments where Shay is hers alone before he inevitably go back to the Archbishop. All right, Valerie said as she cracks her fist, let's get this show on the road. She said as the symbol of those who practiced dark magic appeared underneath her feet, finally to be able to tear that bastard to pieces, she said with a manic laugh before she started chanting the spell. She frowned as she ate one of her favorite food. She don't know why, but for some reason the food tasted stale and horrible. Even though she knows that the cooks in Gareg Mach made sure to prepare the utmost quality of meals for everyone, something about the food just doesn't taste right. No. She thought as she put the plate aside, she already lose her appetite anyways. I know why, she thought. Damn it, I need something else to do. Something other than paperworks, something, anything. She thought, just to take my mind off Shay. She thought as his face flashed through her mind, from his smiling face to his determined eyes to his voice, everything is only making her confused and making her agitated. Suthies can only sigh as she felt everything and heard every thought that passed through Byleth. Just as she is about to decide that she is going to confront Shay about the past weeks that he have been avoiding her, she suddenly felt a spell passed through her. Suthies, she called to the goddess inside her. Damn it. Suthies said, she is already starting to search for them. She said. She gritted her teeth at this. Of all the days, no, this is good. Fighting will take her mind off Shay. Fighting will make everything right again and she will feel better again. Let's go, she said as she opened the window. Wait. Suthies said as she get ready to jump. Going to battle without any plan or proper preparations will prove to be fatal. She said. Well, they are searching for that person now, right? She said. Aren't we pretty much pressed for time now? She asked. We are going to take action now. She said. You are being reckless, Byleth. Suthies screamed. No, I'm just taking action as quickly as possible, she reasoned as she jumped out and took a good few meters away from the ground. He flinched a little as he felt a spell passed him by. Arvel, he called out in his mind. Yes, I felt it too, Arvel said. It seems like the mourner of Atlanta is starting her search for the scavenger, he said. He is about to excuse himself and respond to the spell himself when you will go and respond to an enemy you know you will never beat. You are pathetic and useless. How can you ever hope to defeat this much stronger enemy when you can't even defeat a measly and weak minion? He clenched his fist as he stopped himself from taking action. The voice inside his head is right, he is weak, and what would he do there? Be a burden to Byleth when she responded to the spell. I will do better being in the sidelines rather than fight by her side, he thought bitterly. You are being a fool, Arvel screamed at him. I'm only being realistic here. She doesn't need me. I'm only a hindrance to her, he shouted at Arvel. You must be an even bigger fool than I thought you are, Arvel said eerily calm. If you can't see it, then there is no point in arguing with you, he said before he went silent. He sighed at Arvel's silence. Sershay, Sophia called out in worry. Yes, he asked. Is everything all right, Sophia asked. He simply smiled at her, though he knows that it came out as forced. I'm fine, he said, trying to hide what he is really feeling, trying to hide the void of loneliness inside his heart, the one that was created by Byleth's absence. Just thinking, he said as he reached out to get his glass of water and missing the small paper bag on the table before he managed to catch it, but not without one button escaping the clutches of the paper bag. As soon as the indigo button hit the floor, it rolled away from him as though trying to get away from someone as pathetic like him. He is about to sit up and give chase to the button when a cane went down on the ground, stopping the indigo button in its quest of escape. What naughty little button, an old woman's voice said. He froze in place as soon as his eyes landed on the old woman. Something feels off about this old woman, he thought as he looked at the old woman, dressed in an elegant but simple garment that told him that she is from a lower noble family. Oh, Sophia said. Let me take care of that, madam, she said as she sat up from her seat. The old woman tipped her hat in acknowledgement. You are too kind, young lady, the old woman said as she proceeded to pick up the button. Here you go, she said with a smile. Sophia gave her a polite smile. I could have picked it up for you, madam, she said as she held out her hand for the old woman. He abruptly went out of his stupor and got out of his chair and put himself between Sophia and this weird old woman. Don't you dare touch her, he exclaimed, pushing Sophia further behind him while shooting a glare towards the old woman. The old woman's just blinked in surprise. Oh. The old woman muttered with an amused tone. So, you can see through my tricks, young man? She asked softly. His blood ran cold as soon as that phrase came out of the old woman's mouth. An Agarthan? Here? Now? He thought as cold sweat runs down his neck. Damn it, why now? He thought in anguish as the memories of that time went through his mind, memories of being weak and defenseless as that monster's claw almost crushed him, weak and defenseless and unable to protect his comrade from harm. It seems like we are due to a discussion, young man. The old woman said. How about we take this somewhere more private? She asked as she rose from her seat with the same elegance he usually see from Byleth. Don't give me that look, the old woman said. I won't lift a finger to harm such an accommodating and hospitable folks, she said as she slowly walks towards the door. He was flabbergasted by this. Byleth did say that some Agarthans are rather tolerable by nature and won't make unnecessary fights without any reasons or benefit for them, but he can't let his guard down, not when Sophia is in a potentially dangerous situation. Just who are you? He asked carefully. Like I told you, the old woman said. How about we take this somewhere private, somewhere that we won't be heard talking, and do bring the young lady, she said. As soon as Erebos Castle came into view, she can feel an ache in her heart as Shay came to her mind, his smile, his laugh, and his determined eyes. Why here? She thought angrily, why would they come here at such a bad time? She thought as she felt the familiar surge of Suthi's power. I'll defeat her. I'll make her regret coming here. She announced as soon as she landed in front of the brown-haired woman. Chapter 17, The Hunt Begins 3. That was fast, Valerie muttered as soon as the Archbishop landed in front of her. Ah, Suthies, said Valerie Helena Regnus, she said. Suthies, Valerie said, and this must the infamous Archbishop, she said, eyeing her from head to toe with a judgmental gaze. The rumors certainly exaggerated you, Archbishop, Valerie said with a slight sneer. And did she see jealousy in her eyes? You are not as beautiful as they say you are, she said with a scoff. She kept her mouth shut as Valerie keeps glaring at her statement. Just to be sure, Suthies said, who are you looking for, mourner of Atlanta? She asked. It seems like you have an idea on who, Valerie said, but I'll entertain you, your holiness, she said, putting an emphasis on Suthi's title. I'm thinking of tearing that bastard to pieces, she said with smirk. You know, that damned scavenger or whatever they are called now, Valerie said. The scavenger of life, the djinn? Suthies asked. That's what I say, old hag, Valerie said. Suthies managed to hold back a growl at that remark. She is about to say something. Don't you dare, Suthies said. I wasn't saying anything, yet, she said. But you are about to say something, Suthies said. Well, she is right about you being one. Ow! She said as she felt a light electric shock coursing through her body. What was that for? She asked. Suthies just gave her a huff. Anyway, you best leave the scavenger of life alone, mourner of Atlanta, she said. There is no reason for you to hunt down such a harmless person, Suthies said. Upon hearing Suthies say that the scavenger of life is one of the harmless Agarthans, she saw the mourner of Atlanta's face contort into something of a rage and bloodlust combined. Harmless? Valerie asked with a repressed anger. Did you just call an Agarthan harmless? She shouted. I did, Suthies said. Didn't you hear yourself just now, Fellstar? Valerie shouted. They are Agarthan, and an alive Agarthan is just as good as a pest in this world. She said. Or have you forgotten what they did in Xanadu? Valerie asked in outraged. How they slaughtered your people. How they defiled and desecrated your body and that of the bodies of your comrades. She exclaimed. Those dastardly whoresons deserves nothing but the most painful of deaths. Nothing but suffering and pain for the whole of humanity. Valerie stated with all of the venom and all of the hatred she is able to muster. I'll kill them. I'll kill every one of them. To the last man, women, and children. Valerie said with a manic and bloodthirsty smile. That kind of mindset is what led to that massacre in the first place. Suthies said. The retribution I conduct upon Agartha is the root cause of Xanadu. Will you disrupt the peace of this land once more just because of your thirst for blood? Suthies asked enraged, and she knows that Suthies is guilty at what happened millennia ago. You are one to talk, Fellstar, Valerie scoffed. And there won't be a day that will pass that the consequences of my actions would never haunt me. It will always tear away at me as long as I shall live, Suthies said. So? Valerie asked. What does it have to do with me? She asked. You can seek your own peace by your own. You can deal with your grief with your own terms, and I will do mine on my own term, Valerie said with a solemn and almost sad look in her eyes. So, she said as the solemn air around the older woman disappeared and a smile full of bloodlust appeared on her face once more. She immediately draws the sword of the Creator as soon as she felt a murderous intent emanating from the mourner of Atlanta. Oh! Valerie said with a manic and amused smile, raring to fight. Huh! She said before bursting out in a maniacally bouts of laughter. I like that. Come at me and show me what you can do, Archbishop. Valerie shouted as soon as she is covered in a dark crimson aura and her eyes turned a dangerous red. I'm eagerly waiting for the day to finally test my mettle with you, Ashen Demon. Valerie said as a couple of magic circle appeared around them and on her feet. What the dash, she said as the magic circle underneath her feet exploded. He stayed vigilant as they followed the old woman through the empty streets of the town further down Gareg Mach. As his eyes take in the empty streets, he suddenly realized where they are, and he suddenly feels a hole in his chest as he remembered the last time he was here. My apologies for dragging you two here, the old woman said, but I feel that it is necessary to get away from that town since there is a possibility that I might drag them to danger. Now that she is starting to look for me, she said. Sophia said. Yes, young lady, the old woman asked. This area have been deemed prohibited for non-church staff to enter by Lady Byleth, Sophia said. I don't think it's a good idea to be here lest we get into trouble with the church, she said. No worries about it, young lady, the old woman said as she led them inside some sort of fair. I'm sure the Archbishop wouldn't mind us, she said. Sophia looked around the premises and taking in the colorful pennants banner hanging overhead them, the colorful stalls that still housed the goods and merchandise from across Fodlan and beyond, left behind by their owners who either fled the danger during the events of Great Tree Moon or one of its victims. Saddening, isn't it? The old woman asked. Why yes, Sophia said, to think that such happiness and pleasures would be taken away because of one man's ambitions and desires is just tragic, and more so at the loss of such many lives just because of such selfish impulses, she said. The old woman hummed. Might be so, she said, but oftentimes, we people have desires so mighty that we tend to ignore the consequences of our actions, she said, even more so when it's a desire fueled by the heart, the old woman said as she looked at one of the stall. The unique and intricate designs of the handcrafted jewelries and clothes seems to make the woman soften in what looked like sorrows and nostalgia for the better and simpler times. The heart would want what it desires even if it is the desire to go back to the time where everything is vibrant and simple, she said softly, and those who doesn't have any attachments to the past doesn't see the pain they have caused when such a thing was destroyed, the old woman said, and the one who have caused such a tragedy is no exception, she said. What do you mean? Sophia asked. That man wanted to see his loved one once again, the old woman said, wanted to hold her, to be with her once more even if it's the last time he would do so, she said. For just a fleeting moment. Sophia asked. For someone who have loved someone as deeply as him, a fleeting moment, a fleeting touch is enough to last him an eternity, the old woman said. But that's still such a selfish thing to do. Sophia said. The old woman just turned her eyes towards the young nun, undaunted and unbothered by her sudden outburst. Then, tell me, she said, don't you wish to spend time with someone, holy and unmistakable yours even for just a fleeting seconds before they eventually go back to their respective places? The old woman asked. Sophia is about to say something when her eyes caught sight of Shay. The light of the setting sun seems to make him look ethereal and almost divine, like one of those holy nights in the book stories she used to read, and so far away from her and she is suddenly reminded. She is also like that man. She is selfish enough not to tell Shay that the Archbishop finds him an integral part of her everyday life and that the Archbishop is lost without him, but she didn't. She let Shay think that someone as strong as the Archbishop doesn't need him, that the Archbishop is unreachable for someone like them when in reality it wasn't like that at all. Sophia is lost in thought that she didn't feel the old woman coming closer to her until she is close enough to her. Excuse me, young lady, the old woman said before she snapped her fingers in front of Sophia's face. He saw how her bright and beautiful brown eyes turned into two muddled brown before she went limp and closed her eyes. The old woman caught Sophia's limp form in her arms. You, he said as he summoned his sword in his hand and readied himself for battle. Now, the old woman said as she carried Sophia to the nearest bench and lay her down gently. I merely put her to sleep, she said. You don't want her to know who you are, right? The old woman said. Vessel of Epimondes, the old woman said. How did, he said flabbergasted at her. Can you hear me, old friend? The old woman asked. I never thought that I would meet you like this, old friend, Arvel said. You know him, Arvel? he asked. Quite so, Arvel said. It's been a while, he said. Hey, he said. Oh, pardon me, boy, the old woman said. Where are my manners? She said. Let me introduce myself to you properly, she said. My name is Beelzebub, or you can call me the Jinn, the scavenger of life, she said, and smiled when she noticed the glare he is shooting her way. No need to be hostile, boy, she said. It is quite rude, she said. He continued to glare at the old woman. So, I introduced myself, the old woman said. How about you do the same, boy, the old woman suggested. And why should I? He growled. It is only common courtesy to introduce oneself, the old woman said with a shrug of her frail shoulders. No worries, she said. I have no desire to kill you nor take away your life force, the old woman said. Consider it a favor to Epimens, she said. But why are you here for? He asked, still not letting his sword go. Hiding away from that bloodthirsty woman, the old woman. Now, will you relax yourself, my boy, she said. I won't harm you since I might risk upsetting the Nabatean that kept hanging around you, the old woman said. Nabatean? He asked in confusion. So, you are unaware that you are with a Nabatean, huh? The old woman said. Anyway, I'm not here to harm you nor any of the good folks living in this lovely town of yours, she said. I was merely passing by, the old woman said. I see, he said as he relaxes. I don't sense any killing intent nor any desires for a fight, he thought as he summoned the sword away. I guess I can hear her out, he thought. So, you decided to hear me out, boy, the old woman said. As long as you keep to your words and never lay finger to Sophia and to everyone, he said. No worries about that, the old woman said. I have no desire to kill anyone nor harm anyone, not when I see them as fragile and deserve to be protected at all costs, the old woman said. I learned my lesson the hard way, a long time ago, she said. What do you mean? He asked, confused, since he knows that the Agarthans is a very aggressive bunch that have no regards to human life, at least basing his encounter with Erebos. Let's just say that I destroyed someone precious for my own ambition and I regret it ever since, the old woman said. Tell me, boy, she said as she looked up upon the crimson-colored sky of the dusk, do you have someone dear you wanted to protect? The old woman asked. Byleth came to mind. Yes, he said, looking away as he remembered that Byleth is already strong enough that she doesn't have any reason to even need him by her side. Then, you must know the wholehearted desire to protect that person, the old woman said, and the instincts that came along with it, she said. Of course, he knows, but he ignored it all the same, the burning feelings of desire to see Byleth safe and to make sure that no one will hurt her. Feelings of wanting to make sure she is happy and safe is the feeling that he is sure went outside of being her knight, but a more personal desire of his, which is why he ignored it. He ignored it because he is her knight, and according to his code, a knight shouldn't have such a personal feeling towards their liege, especially if they are a personal knight. A knight can't form any attachment to their liege outside of what their duty dictates to them. Therefore, he can't have any personal feelings or attachment to Byleth outside of being her knight. But damn it all, he still wanted to protect her, not as a knight but as Shay. Who are fooling? You can't even defend yourself and you wanted to protect her? Her, who is stronger and better than you'll ever be. Right. Then, you can understand my reasoning, the old woman said. Why I want to leave this world unharmed, she said. Something that was lost will never be brought back to life once it was lost, she said. Even if you managed to bring it back, it will never be the same. It will always exist as a husk of itself and nothing more, the old woman said before she looked down at the pendant hanging around her neck. He can feel something within it, a large amount of life force. But, he said, this is only the life force I took from those who are already dying, the old woman said before she turned her eyes to him and his heart. And I won't take yours since yours is tied to Epimens and I don't want the risk of angering the Nabatean that keeps hanging around you. No matter how small that life yours now, the old woman said woefully. So, he said as holds his hand over his heart. You knew, he said. Yes, your time is about to run out, but by whatever coincidence you have come upon, Epimens managed to save whatever measly remains of your time, the old woman said. Yes, he said he did, he said with a tired smile on his face. He knows that he is supposed to die the day the Ashen Demon massacred everyone in his former mercenary company Hell. He spent a good chunk of 2 years searching for them, but when nothing comes up, he assumed that they are dead, and then he lost the very reason why he continued to push on living, and Arvel is the only reason why he is still pushing onward, despite the fact that he have been living only for the sake of living and waiting for death to finally claim him. And no need to worry, boy, the old woman said, interrupting his line of thought. I won't stay long in this place, she said. A very brutish woman is pursuing me as of late. Can't say I'm flattered, the old woman said. I say that I pity whoever the Nabatean that is fighting that barbaric woman now, the old woman said, though I know she is not the type to kill anyone during the fight, but she will wound your friend in order to make her back off, she said. He smiled woefully. I see, he said, finally realizing who is the Nabatean the old woman is talking about. So, she is the one you are referring to, he muttered. No need to worry about her, he said. This caught the old woman's attention. Byleth is, he said. She swung her blade sideward as soon as the woman appeared above her, just after she is thrown to the air after she blocked a particular hard punch to her. Valerie laughed at that. You miss, she said as she disappeared as soon as the sword of Creator hit with a bright flash, only for her to multiply into 2. What the? She exclaimed. Byleth. Suthies shouted in an attempt to snap her to reality. She snapped to focus just in time to cast a spell and used that wind spell to dodge her way out of the fist that is about to hit her squarely to her stomach. What was that, Suthies? She asked as she jumped out of the incoming arm from beneath her before she was met by one above her, effectively hitting her, making her fall down to the stone floor with a loud thud, momentarily knocking the air out of her. A spell, Suthies said. It's her specialty spell called Doppelganger, she said. It's combined with a wind spell that when it was hit, in accordance of how strong the gust of air is, the more duplicate she can spawn, and if the spell wasn't set off yet then the spell will keep going and going. She said. She is about to say something when Valerie appeared in front of her, and this time with a flame ready on hand, literally. What are you looking so distracted about? Valerie exclaimed as she throws the fireball at her. She barely dodged the fireball itself, but the following explosion caught her, throwing her a couple of meters away from she as initially is. She took a moment to try and catch her breath, and to her surprise the woman waited for her to recover. Are you truly the one who slain Erebos? Valerie asked, disappointment evident in her voice. She wanted to say something, but she is too beaten to speak. Byleth is strong, he said woefully but proudly at the fact that despite the fact that she won't be needing him, he is proud to be known as one of her knights. The old woman caught on to the tone of his voice and the expression on his face and tipped her head down before humming to herself. Chapter 18, Intermission of the Conflict. Byleth. The old woman asked. Can't say that the name rings any bells inside this ancient head of mine, she said. I don't recall any Nabatean who have such a name, the old woman said. Oh, he said. Byleth isn't a Nabatean, or at least not fully a Nabatean, he said. The one you are sensing might be Suthies, he said. Did you just say Suthies? The old woman asked, as in the goddess of Fodlan. She asked. Yes, he said, quite surprised by the more lighter tone in the old woman's voice. The old woman seems to sigh in relief. Then, would you kindly pass along that I don't intend to harm anyone or the very peace of Fodlan, she said. Not now, when it finally found the peace it longs for, the old woman said. He looked at his feet. Sure, I will, he said. If she wanted to talk to me again, he said downheartedly, as long as she wasn't bored of me yet, then there is still the chance that we might talk once more, he said with a bitter smile. The old woman looked at him and then to Sophia, then back again before she tipped her head downward as she heard the tone of his voice once more. So, that's what it is, the old woman said as she remembered the soft looks. Sophia, why would you think Suthies would leave you unsupervised knowing that you housed Epimens himself? She asked. She might not even acknowledge me anymore, he said numbly. The old woman was confused by that statement since she can sense Suthi's presence lingering on him, and that told her that whoever housed Suthi's kept themselves close to him whether or not the boy realized it. But that's the problem, he said as he looked at his boots again. I can't do anything for her other than be her sword and shield, he said, but that's just about it, he said clenching his fist. But what good is a sword and a shield if it can't even do what it is supposed to do, and worst still, he said, I can't do anything else to ease her burdens. As Archbishop and as an individual, all I did is become another burden to her heart, he said with a bitter laugh. Such a useless man, he said. Her. The old woman thought, realizing how the boy refers to Suthi's vessel. So, the Archbishop is a woman, she thought as she looked at the young nun once more, and everything become even clearer now, and she sighed. The descendants of the beast sure are such a fascinating and at times a frustrating bunch, the old woman thought, but that's the more they are to be protected at all cost. These beautifully flawed creatures, she thought with a small smile on her face. Did you ask her? The old woman asked. He jolted a little at the question. It might be tasteless at best and all, but, the old woman said, did you ever ask this Byleth if you are useless to her or not, or if you are only a burden to her? She asked. But, he said, it's embarrassing. He said, like I would have the audacity to ask someone of her station, it just wasn't right, he said. The old woman clapped at that. Well, aren't you an unsociable and stubborn type? She said, so, you just assumed that because she is stronger than you, she is better off without you by her side and abandoned her? The old woman asked. Did she ever say that you are useless to her, or did you just came to that conclusion yourself? She asked. He can't answer her. What is he going to say? The moment you realized that she is stronger than you, capable of things beyond your reach, the old woman said, you immediately shut yourself away from her just because you felt intimidated by the talents she have without any regards of how she felt, she said. How much of a pathetic knight can you get, boy? The old woman asked. It might be so, he said, trying to stop his fist from shaking, but, he said, trying to remain calm. Byleth is the Archbishop, she is beloved by all Fodlan. She have all these people adoring her, loving her, he said. What's a measly and pathetic nobody is to her when she have the whole continent at her feet? He said, nothing, I'm simply of no value to her but a temporary amusement she can throw away once she got bored with me, he said bitterly. The old woman sighed in exasperation. My, Suthies, she thought, I thought you would lecture both him and your vessel. Same goes to you too, Epimens, she thought. Were you two trying to protect both of your vessels from this? The old woman thought in amusement. Let me tell you something about Agarthans and Nabateans and their similarities to one another and to the people of this world, the old woman said. He intently looked at the old woman before her. You see, we Agarthans, and as well as the Nabates, despite the curious and ancient power we held, are not that different from you and the rest, the old woman said. We feel different kinds of emotion too, she said. From happiness to sadness to anger, the old woman said. No matter how strong, crafty, or powerful we are, she said, we still felt the same as you, humans do, because we are all the same. We have a heart that even if it's made of stones like those of Nabateans are not at all hard, and despite being a stone, the old woman said, is the softest of stone you'll ever find under different circumstances, she said. It can soften and it can harden as well, the same with us Agarthans too, the old woman said. So, you are saying that Byleth is the same as me? He asked. More so, the old woman said. She is Suthi's vessel, therefore, she is half Nabatean, she said. You two are even more alike than you think, the old woman said. But, she is so strong, he said. How can she be the same as me? She asked. Yes, she is strong, if you compare yourself to her, the old woman said, but she isn't as unreachable as you think she is, she said, especially, since she is also half human, human that doesn't have a stone for a heart, the old woman said. She is the goddess vessel, he stated. How can she be reachable by a mortal like me? he asked. I said that just now, the old woman said. She is strong and she is the goddess vessel, she said, but that is all there is to her. The old woman said, she is still human just like you and me, she said, a human that is bound to limit and bound to their heart. The old woman said, just like you, she said. Suddenly, by that one simple statement, everything becomes clear. How she would smile when her favorite food was served, how she would grow frustrated when things won't go her way, how she would laugh at the silliest of things, and how she would turn red when she did something embarrassing. How could I not see that before? He thought, clenching his fist even tighter as images of her played through his mind. Even though I have been by her side all the time since the day I met her, how could I have not seen that? He thought in frustration, even if she is the goddess vessel, even if she is the archbishop, how could I ignore our similarities to one another? How can I ignore her feelings just like that? He thought as Byleth's crestfallen and hurt face came to mind, and after everything, I left her just because I felt insecure towards her, because I realized that she is stronger than me, and I thought that if she realized that, she might realize that it was pointless to keep me around and she will leave me, she will abandon me because she don't need me anymore, and thought that I wouldn't be hurt if I left her before she does. He thought, gritting his teeth in frustration at himself, left her and breaking my oath that I would always protect her from all harm, just because I felt so insecure about myself being weak. He thought, I'm such a pathetic man, he thought as he calmed himself down. When he does calmed down, he looked at the old woman. He said timidly, thank you, he said, I needed that, he said. Don't be so naive as to trust someone's altruism, boy, the old woman said, I'm only doing it for my own sake, she said. It wouldn't do me any good if I were to seek help to the two of the most emotionally distracted duo, she said. Still, he said, thank you, he said before turning to Sophia. How can I wake her up? He asked as he picked up the sleeping nun in his arms. She is only under a sleeping spell, the old woman said. She will wake up within 15 minutes from now, she said. Right, he said as holds the paper bags and put them on Sophia. I shall go now and hopefully, her grace is still there, waiting for me, he said before he used shadow slide to take them back to the monastery. The old woman was left standing in the middle of an empty town as she watched the sun disappear on the horizon, finally signaling for the deeds of the day to be put to rest and encourage each and everyone to take solace in the comfort of their homes and loved ones. It's finally over, huh? The old woman muttered as the sky started to darken. I'm impressed, Valerie said with a smile as she dodged another attack from her. Despite the injuries you have sustained earlier, she said as she managed to hit Valerie only for her to multiply again. You are still raring to go, she said as she appeared behind her with her hand half transformed into a claw. She flinched as the claw hit her on the back, pushing him away a little before a flurry of flames appeared from the sky, and she managed to dodge before a stone arm hit her on the stomach, throwing her a good meter away from where she is. I can't believe this. She is too distracted to even realize it, Suthies thought as she watched her vessel struggle to get on her feet. She have reverted to a child that is lost and confused just because her companion have left her. This is bad. Damn it, Geralt. She internally ranted as Byleth managed to stand up, but not without having her legs collapsing on her once more. Nice and safe, he muttered as he tucked Sophia in her bed and nods to himself when he managed to make sure that she is safe. Just when he is about to turn and leave to go and look for Byleth, a small and warm hand shoot up to gently grabs his hand. Are you feeling better now, Circe? Sophia asked softly. He turned to look at her, quite surprised that Sophia is awake despite the spell. He said. Please be all right now, Circe, Sophia said as bright sleepy brown eyes meet his purple orbs. Because such a dark expression doesn't suit someone as brilliant and radiant as you, she said, and I'm sure she finds it unpleasant too whenever you make such a face, Sophia said. He grimaced at that. I tried to cheer you up today, but it seems like I wasn't enough, Sophia said. I tried, but it won't be enough, not when you are seeking someone else, she said. He clenched his fist in frustration at that statement before he kneeled down before her and leveled his eyes on hers. No, you are more than enough, he Said, it wasn't anyone's fault but mine, he said softly. Thank you for today, Sophia, he said, earning himself a drowsy smile from Sophia. You call me by my name without adding Ms. Sophia said with a toothy smile. He smiled at that reaction. Something about that smile made him warm all over. When you are yourself once again, Sophia said, can we go to town again? She asked. Of course, he said with a soft smile. Just say the word, he said. Sophia gave him a drowsy smile before she went back to sleep again. You are such a fool, Shay, Arvel said. I know, he said, not only I hurt Byleth but I unconsciously managed to hurt Miss Sophia too, he said bitterly. Such a pathetic man, he muttered as he closed the door behind him. She is wasted on you, both of them actually, Arvel muttered. I know, he said. Now, to Byleth, he muttered as he walks towards the audience chamber. He hesitated to open the door to her office. Would she even want to see me? He thought as he looked at the door. After I left her alone, would she still want me by her side? He thought before he shakes his head. I have to see her. No, I want to see her. I want to be by her side and I would beg on my hands and knees if I have to. He thought as he opened the door to the office. Only to find it empty save for several unfinished paperworks, an unfinished plate of food, and an open window. She left. He muttered as he saw a dent on the windowsill that indicates that Byleth used the window to went somewhere. Oh no. He said as he realized something. She went after the mourner of Atlanta, huh? Arvel said. He gritted in teeth as every possible scenario of Byleth being hurt or worse comes to mind and he tried to think of all the places the mourner of Atlanta will go. Think, damn it. Where did she go? Damn it. If only, no, I have to calm down and think, he thought as he tried to think of all the possible places. Damn it. Nothing comes to mind. What am I going to do? He thought, panicking as he draws a blank and he is about to fall further into his mind when a familiar presence and warmth managed to invade his senses and before he knows it, a magic circle appeared under his feet, a circle that contains Arvel's symbol and the crest of flames. He said in shock as he felt his shadow slide activating as the crest of flame glows brightly. But how, what? He muttered as he suddenly felt where Byleth is. No, it's not the time for that. He said as he tried to grasp this new power before he disappeared. I keep losing, I don't know what is going on, she thought as she looked at the brunette in front of her, sporting a smug smile. Are you really the Ashen Demon? Are you really the infamous archbishop that helped turn the tide of war to favor King Dimitri? Valerie asked, or are you just a weakling who just got lucky? She asked mockingly. No. I know, she thought as she closed her eyes again and saw Shay again, but I just refused to acknowledge it. I can't focus because he isn't here. I don't know how it happened, but somehow, I forgot how to be alone again. I got too used to his presence beside me and, she thought. All right, Valerie said as she summoned several swords from the sky and started to surround her. It's becoming a bit boring playing with you now, she said as swords around her started to ignite with a purple fire. I'll let you go this once if you promised not to interfere again, she said with a smile. Take this, Valerie said. Solomon's circle of fire, she said. Shay, she thought, closing her eyes once and seeing the coldness in his eyes again, and she immediately felt so weak. She can feel the spell activating and closed her eyes to brace herself for the pain. Instead she felt a pair warm arms lifting her to an equally warm and soft albeit a bit hard pillow before a familiar sound of a beating heart hit her ears. Sorry, I'm late, a familiar voice said softly as he pulls her closer to his heart. She dared hoped and she dared look at the man who is holding her now. She dared to hope that he is real and he have come back to her. Shay, she muttered the name of the very man that kept her confused as of late. The very man that keeps making her feel so many foreign emotions as of late. You're here, she said as she clings to him as though he will disappear the moment she let go, and maybe that's the case. Maybe if she let go then he will leave her again. Yes, Shay said as he leans his forehead on top of her head. I'm here now, he said as she tightened her hold on him to the point that she managed to rip his tunic a bit. Now, rest for now, he said as she met his eyes. I'll take care of things here, he said. You will leave again. Once I closed my eyes, you will leave again, she said as she registered that he looked different. But she don't care. I don't want you to leave me again, she muttered as she buried her face on his chest. She hated sounding needy, but somehow, she don't care. All she knows that she have to tell him, she needed to tell him, that she wanted to be by his side, always. She felt Shay embracing her as best as he could with him carrying her in his arms, and she wrapped her arms around his neck as she ignored every spell that was thrown towards their way, which was dispelled by the ring of Andovri. I won't, Shay said. I'm so sorry, he said. I won't leave you again, so, please, Shay said. Take a rest and I'll handle the rest, he said. But, she said as her vision is starting to fade. I will be by your side when you wake up, Shay said as he holds her even tighter. I promise, he said. She hesitated, but she feels tired and she wanted to sleep for a while. She looked at him. She knows he looked different, but she also knows that she can trust him. Even if he looked different, he is still Shay, and she knows this because she recognized his voice and his warmth. Therefore, she can trust him, and that's the last thought she have as she drifted to sleep, with her in his arms, and she feels the safest she have been since her father. He smiled as soon as he saw Byleth drifted off to sleep and gently walks to a more safer area where he can tuck her in safely while he fight this damned woman. You are not playing fair, twerp, Suthies said softly as she felt Byleth fall into a peacefully slumber. I know, he said as he tucked a hair behind Byleth's ear. That form, Epimins, Suthies said. He wasn't supposed to come here looking like this, but we have no choice, Arvel said. Suthies sighed at that. Just make sure that you are there when she wakes up, Suthies said. I will, he said before he turned his glowing red orbs towards the brown-haired woman. So, the woman said, you are that bastard's vessel, huh? She asked with a manic smile. This keeps getting better and better. The woman smiled. To kill that scavenger and Epimins in one blow, the woman said with a laugh. Must be my lucky day, she said. He blinked as he walks further away from where Byleth is. And you are? He asked as polite as he can despite the raging anger he feeling now. My apologies, the woman said. Valerie Helena Regnus is the name, and as for you, she said as she shot a fireball at him, is of no importance, she said as she admired the explosion. Valerie smiled at what she thought an easy victory when. A pleasure to meet you, he said as he appeared behind her. Ms. Regnus, he said as deliver a strong and hard kick on the woman, which immediately sent her crashing to the ground before he teleported in front of her. Well, then, he said as several dark spikes appeared behind him. Shall we? He asked. Chapter 19, Intermission of the Conflict 2. So, you are the one who dared to lay a finger on her, huh? He asked as he let out all the rage he felt as he released the spikes on her. Valerie barely dodged his attack as she rolled out of the way, but not without being caught by the following explosion that came from the spike. Only because she is interfering with my plan, Valerie said as she wiped up the blood from her mouth. He said as he draws his sword and summoned the other one on the other. Even so, he said as he readied himself for battle. You have no right to harm her, he said as he points the sword in his right hand towards Valerie. I will beat you, he said. Valerie smiled manically at that declaration. I want to see you try, she shouted as a magic circle appeared above him and immediately rained a volley of fireball on him. How'd you like that, boy? Valerie asked as she admired her handiwork and promptly paled when the dust dissipated and saw him standing in the same place as he was, unscathed and very, very furious. Is that it? He asked as he started to walk towards Valerie. Is that the power you are boasting about? He asked as Valerie fired another shot of fire towards her and he swung the sword on his right hand to make the spell dissipated. I must say, you must be quite conceited to be this assured of your ability, he said as he disappeared from her sight. Valerie suddenly is on her guard. Conceited enough to neglect that her grace is not fighting in her full capacity, he said. "Come out and face me, coward!" Valerie exclaimed. "Oh," he said as he appeared in front of her, "but aren't you Moriso?" he said as Valerie let out a thunder spell at him and he disappeared again, for using every possible surprise attack first thing in battle. He said as he hit her with the hilt of his sword. Valerie swung her clawed hand on him, making him use Shadow Flash to avoid the attack and appearing a good meter away from before he started swinging his sword and letting out 2 purple wind blades towards her with each swing of his sword, which Valerie barely dodged before he used his Shadow Flash as he releases one final blade and went after it, obscuring Valerie's view of him before he promptly appeared in front of her with his blade ready to strike the bitch that dared to harm Byleth. Valerie is caught off guard by that and barely managed to put up a shield as the sword made contact with the measly shield she managed to procure in such a short, and the impact from the sword made her slide a little and she saw Epimon's vessel smirk as he released an explosive energy from his sword, throwing her a few meters away from him and dispelling her shield. What the hell? She thought as she saw Boy summon dark spikes around him before he sent them towards her. That wasn't dark spike, at least not the usual ones, she thought as she dodged one before the one spike she dodged followed her before it hit the ground, unlike the usual dark spike before she felt one hit the ground next to her before it was followed by the other 5 and promptly exploded, throwing her injured and beaten body close to the edge. I have to get away from here or I will be killed before I can even accomplished my mission here, Valerie thought. What are you being so distracted about? The man asked as he appeared above her, blade positioned above one another forming an X shape before he swung them at the same, releasing a dangerous amount of that purple energy and destroying the whole perimeter of the edge of the castle's roof, throwing her on the edge as soon as she dodged it at the nick of time. And where do you think you are going? The man asked as he runs along the walls of the castle as she falls down before he throws the weirdly familiar sword towards her before he disappeared again and appeared just a few meters away from her with the sword in hand and glowing a dangerous crimson red, and the man readied himself to swing, and swing he did, releasing a stream of lava-looking energy from the sword. She barely managed to procure a shield just as the attack made impact to her and further pushing her faster to her descent on the ground, in which she managed to chant a teleportation spell as the sword managed to stab her. As soon as his sword almost impaled the woman, she disappeared from sight, making his sword impale the ground instead and causing a strong explosion around him that destroyed almost half the land surrounding him upon impact. I thought so, he muttered as he let go of the sword, making it disappear on sight. You really went all out on Valerie, huh? Arvel said in amusement. She harmed Byleth to such a degree, I just can't contain myself, he said. Remember that you are also the cause of her distress that leads to her being harmed, Arvel said. I know, he said as he used Shadow Slide to get to where Byleth is. It seems like as long as I'm using this to get to Byleth, it doesn't make me tired as it used to, he said. Must be one of the effects of us being separated, Arvel said as he picked Byleth up in his arms. Might be, he said. Suthies, he called out to the goddess as he noticed that Byleth is as good as new and her wounds and injuries appeared to be healed, and the only indication that Byleth was in a fight was her tattered white dress and her mused dark teal hair. It's my flame of purification, Suthies said. Since we are now separated and the crest of flame managed to merge back to me, I can finally utilize it in its full capacity again, she said. So, it's an improved version of her crest, he said. Either way, thank you, Suthies, he said. No need to thank me, twerp, Suthies said. She is after all my vessel and my family, Suthies said. It's only natural that I use every possible resources for her well-being, Suthies said. I will still thank you, Suthies, he said as he prepared to use Shadow Flash again. We have a lot to talk about, twerp, Suthies said. I know, he said, but let me make sure that Byleth is safe and warm in the monastery, he said. Just make sure you are by her side when she wakes up, Suthies said. I will, he said as they all disappeared. She was greeted by the blurry view of the ceiling as soon as she opened her eyes. It took her a while to adjust and process that she is back in her room in the monastery. In the monastery, she muttered as she sat up as carefully as she could. She feels sore all over. She wasn't even surprised since she just received a beating earlier. She called as soon as she remembered what happened earlier and hoping that Shay would answer her, and she can feel her heart dropping when no one answered. Did he lied to her about him being by her side when she wakes up? Is that some kind of a ploy to make her let go of him when he knows that she wouldn't once she managed to get a hold of him? Was he trying to get away from her? Just as her thoughts begun to descend to a more depressing and darker thought of throwing Shay to the nearest dungeon and chain him down there so that he'll never leave her again, a knock interrupted her ever-growing darker thoughts. "Your Grace." Shay called out to her from the other side of the door. "I'll be coming in, all right," he said as the door started to open slowly and cautiously, as though he is making sure that he won't disturb her slumber. Was it because he is planning on leaving her once more after he has done whatever business he have with her? "You are awake," Shay said as soon as he entered her chamber, carrying a tray of food. "That's good," he said as he put down the tray on her table. "I was beginning to worry, but now, it seems like you are all right," he said with a relieved tone in his voice. She remained silent as she followed his every movement as he pranced around her chamber, preparing her meal, and if he should think about leaving her again, she is ready to use divine pulse, a scary emotion, but she don't care at a time. All she cared about at that moment is that she have to find a way to make him stay. "Is something wrong, Your Grace?" Shay asked as he turned his attention from the food and to her and started walking to her bedside. "If something is hurting," he said as he sat on her bed and few good meter away from her before he reached out to touch her forehead. The warmth from his hand immediately eased her nerves, and on instinct she grabs his much bigger hand in hers before she lean her cheek on it after kissing it. Shay's eyes soften at the gesture as she continue burying her cheek into his palm while he gently and almost lovingly caressed her cheek with his thumb. "Want me to call Manuela?" he asked as he started to gently move away his hand from her cheek and out of her grasp. She answered his question by throwing her arms around his neck and pulling him closer to her. "I'm fine," she said as she buried her face on his neck. "Just stay here," she said, taking in the familiar and calming scent of pine and spices. "Please," she muttered softly. "Don't go anywhere anymore," she pleaded to him, not caring about her dignity as the Archbishop. Shay responded by wrapping his arms around her. "I won't," he said as she tightened her hold on him. "Why did you leave me alone?" she asked, feeling all the emotions she have held in for the past few weeks suddenly burst out. "Did I do something?" she asked as she heard another ripping sound coming from him as she tightened her hold even more on him. "None," Shay said as he pulled her further into his arms. "It was me, and my insecurities," he said. She waited for him to continue as she melted into his embrace. "You are stronger than me, and I just felt inadequate to be called as your knight, moreover as your bodyguard," Shay said. She closed her eyes and took in his calming and soothing scent. Then, she said, burying her face deeper into his neck, "Be stronger. If you feel inadequate, become even stronger," she said as she felt the back of his tunic gave away and she successfully tore it. "So, you'll stay by my side, always," she said. "So, I won't feel this way again," she said as her nails dug into the flesh of his back as she pulls him closer to her. If Shay is hurt by her, he didn't say anything, he just held her. "Please," she said. "Yes," Shay said softly. "I will become stronger if that is your wish," he said. "Because staying by your side have become my wish as well," he said. "I will be stronger." "So," Shay said as he gently pulled her even closer, "if it was even possible, don't be sad anymore," he said. "Swear it to me now," she demanded. "I swear," Shay said softly. "So, please," he said. "Don't cry anymore," Shay said as he felt tears dropping on the skin of his neck. "She really is just like me, but more than that," he thought as Byleth clung to him still as though he is her last anchor on earth. "No matter how strong or powerful she is still a girl, a small and fragile girl. How could I have missed something like that?" he thought as they hold each other in tranquility of the night, lost in their own world. And they are contented to keep it that way, at least for now. "That damn Epimens, Valerie," muttered through gritted teeth as she lay down in her room in Raphael's tavern, sporting several bruises and injuries. "When I recover enough," she muttered, "I swear I'll make you pay, bastard, Valerie said. Chapter 20, Intermission of the Conflict 3. So, you realized what a fool you have been, Suthies said from her place in Bylitha's bed. Yes, he said as he sat on the floor by Bylitha's bedside. I never imagined that I'll be this big of a fool, he said as he shot a sidelong glance on the door of the Archbishop's personal bathroom. Suthies hummed in response. As long as you know, she said, and it isn't a bad thing too, since now, you know your bad sides and your good sides, Suthies said. I can't rely on Bylith to see your bad sides, since all she see is your good sides, but it is as expected from the woman who puts you in such a high regards, Suthies stated. That made me happy, he said with a smile, to know that someone as great as her thought so much of me, he said. Don't get too arrogant by that piece of information, twerp, Suthies said. He laughed at that. I won't, he said. I will use that piece of information to show her that I'm indeed worthy of her, he said happily before his smile disappeared and he became serious again. But I still can't believe Bylith would lose, he said. That is because you put her into a pedestal, Suthies said, and the thought that you of all people would actually view her as the indestructible and unfeeling Archbishop some of the nobles of Fodlan thought her to be, cuts the deepest to her, she said, especially after the things you two went through together last month, Suthies said. What? He asked, clearly confused. Don't tell me you have forgotten what you said to her last week, Suthies asked. Why does it matter if I'm with you when it won't make a difference even if I'm by your side? How could I? He asked, closing his eyes as he remembered the look on Bylitha's face after he told her that, and I regretted ever saying that to her because seeing her look so hurt brought me no greater pain than seeing her like that, he said. Despite that, I left her alone, he said, just because I realized that I have so much weakness and I thought that she have no use for such a pathetic and small man such as me, he said, and then, I sulked and become frustrated even more and I gave up, he said, gave up trying to earn the right to be by her side, earn the right to walk the same path as her, he said with a bitter smile. I'm such a pathetic and weak man, more so when I caused her such distress, he said. Suthies just quietly listen. But what can a pathetic and weak man such as me can do for her? He asked. Suthies hummed thoughtfully. That is for you to find out, twerp, she said, but know that I have no intention of restricting you should you decide to leave, Suthies said, though, I believe that Bylith wasn't as accommodating at the thought of letting you go, at least not the way she is now, she said. He smiled. Thank you for the freedom, Suthies, he said, but I know my place, he said, and that is by her side, forever and always, he said softly. Suthies didn't reply at that, but she appreciate the twerp for choosing to stay by Bylitha's side even if he is given a choice to leave by the goddess herself. Just like what you have done with the fight with Erebos, just stay by her side and that is enough for her, twerp, Suthies thought. As she sunk into the warm water with a blissful sigh, earlier events started to play in her mind and under different circumstances, she would have been embarrassed by her actions earlier, but at the moment she don't care. Not when she finally managed to hold him in her arms once more, and after weeks of having the cloud of confusion hanging overhead and keeps enveloping her heart, the clouds finally cleared away and everything is calm and bright. I will become stronger if that is your wish, she said, because staying by your side have become my wish as well, he said softly. Those words, that promise, it made her so unbelievably happy. She smiled to herself. This happiness, it's foreign and different from the happiness she have felt before, but it wasn't unpleasant, not at all. That's right, she muttered with a small smile on her face. Be stronger and let us be together, she muttered. What? Suthies said incredulously. You met the scavenger of life? Suthies asked before she chuckled. It seems like me and Epimens owed them a great favor, Suthies said. For what? He asked. For putting my block-headed partner into shape again, Arvel said from the silver pocket watch on his waist. Oh, that, he said as he scratches his cheeks. Anyway, that woman, he said as Valerie comes to mind, the mourner of Atlanta, he said. She seems strong and she is a very skilled spellcaster, he said, and one of the things that contributed to Byleth's defeat is because she keeps using a lot of surprise spells and she used Byleth's preference to use the sword in her rather limited ability to cast spells, he said. The mourner of Atlanta is a very renowned spellcaster throughout Adrestia back in the old days, Suthes said, even so far as being the apprentice of the Scavenger of Life, Suthes said. I see, he said, so, the mourner of Atlanta knows a trick or two about the Scavenger of Life, he said. Might be, Suthes said. But it's been 3 millennia since they last meet each other, and with that amount of time, the Scavenger of Life must have already procured another spell, Arvel said, so, I guess it is safe to assume that they have a trick or two up their sleeves, Arvel said. There is also the fact that I can't seem to feel any spell being activated up until the last minute before it activated, he said. If it wasn't for the Ring of Andovri, I would have been gravely injured if not more, he said. So, that's how she did it, Arvel said. What do you mean? He asked. Well, when I battled her back when the War of Heroes is just beginning and I'm fighting on the side of Nemesis, the mourner of Atlanta managed to injure me so badly that I barely managed to repel the Adrestian Empire from slaughtering my remaining brethren as they fled from battle, Arvel said. I never felt her spell before they activated, he said, and before it's too late, Arvel said. So, that's what happened during the War of Heroes, Suthes said. I must say that she pulled that off splendidly, Arvel said. At any rate, Suthes said, we need to think of a way to counter it, she said, which brought us to this key point, Suthes said. Do you still have the Ring of Andovri? Yes, Suthes said. I always have it with me, he said as he put his hand where the Ring of Andovri is placed. This one is a handy tool in defending against any type of magic, he said. That ring used to belong to the Scavenger of Life, Arvel said. I wonder how Erebos managed to get his hand on it, he said. That old bastard indeed have a grubby hand, Suthes said. Arvel chuckled at that. At any rate, we will need that in our fight with the mourner of Atlanta, Suthes said. Let's start thinking of a plan, Arvel said. I say we just give her the good old Bob-am and Gablem, he said as he made a slight moving motion that imitated his usual fighting style. He heard a melodic laugh behind him. The good old Bob-am and Gablem, huh? Byleth said with an amused giggle. He blushed at that. Why, you heard that? He asked. Yup, Byleth said as she took her place behind him and leaned on his back. As much as I find it amusing, I feel compelled to scold you for even suggesting such recklessness, she said. He laughed a little at that. Then, I assume that you have an idea, Your Grace, he said. As a matter of fact, I have, Byleth said. The Ring of Andovri, she said. What about it? He asked. It will be the key to that plan, Byleth said, so, keep it with you for always, she said. Got it, he said. So, when are we gonna go after her? He asked after a moment of listening to Byleth humming a happy tune. When she start moving again, Byleth said. Isn't it always good to take action first? He asked with a little smile as Byleth leaned even closer to him. Not always, Byleth said as she let out a soft sigh of contentment. A first move of good when you have a good counter on the next line of action from enemy, but a first move can also be fatal if you rush headfirst to battle, she said, but letting them make the first wasn't always bad since we can analyze their movement and accordingly to counter them, Byleth said. Plus, we don't know where she is hiding now since she is just that good in hiding her presence, she said. Right, he said. Say, Byleth said. Yes. He asked. Where is the food you brought earlier? Byleth asked. Just over there, he said pointing to the table. Good, Byleth said as she stand up. I didn't eat earlier and got my ass kicked earlier, she Said, "Don't mind me if I indulge myself right at this moment," she said as she walks towards the table. He looked at her back as she prepared the table. The sound of the clattering of fine porcelain is the only music he can hear, and the combination of being in her presence brings a feeling of home for him. "Did you ask her?" "Byleth," he said softly. Byleth stopped for a moment before she went about her task with a hum as a response. "Am I useless to you?" he asked. Upon hearing that, Byleth stopped completely and everything made sense. The event of the last weeks become very clear to her and she smiled. "You are a moron," Byleth simply said, and she hoped that it was enough to make him understand. Despite the wording of that statement, he felt a pleasant warmth from his heart. Byleth took a glance towards him and he gave her a soft smile. "Thank you," he said softly. And Byleth can feel her heart skipping a beat at that, and she abruptly turned her head away from him. Do you want to have dinner with me?" Byleth asked. I mean, you brought too much and I thought," Byleth said. "I would love to, Your Grace," he said with a smile on his face. "Thank you, Your Grace," he said. "Then, come," Byleth said, "or it will be even colder now," she said. "Suthies," he called out to the goddess. "What, twerp? Suthies?" asked. "Do you have the ability to heat a food?" he asked. "Of course not," Suthies said. "But you are a dragon," he said. "Doesn't mean that I can just reheat something." "What? Does breathing fire already equals the ability to reheat one's food?" Suthies asked. "Technically," Byleth said. "Yes," he added. "You are a fire-breathing dragon," Suthies, Arvel chimed in. Both him and Byleth nod their heads in agreement. "You three," Suthies said before she let out a soft laugh a few moments later. "Ms. Valerie," Raphael said cautiously, opening the door to Valerie's room. "What?" Valerie asked, a bit annoyed by Raphael's interruption of her rest. "I brought you dinner, Ms. Valerie," Raphael said as he entered the room carrying a tray of freshly cooked pumpkin soup, a freshly baked cornbread lathered with a hint of butter on it, and a roasted pork marinated in a Dresdian-style sweet and spicy sauce, sided with the stir-fried vegetables. "That smells good, kid," Valerie said as she felt her injuries healing. "Thank you," Raphael said as he put the tray on the small table. "It's the least I can do to help you with your fight with the Archbishop," he said remorsefully. "Are you guilty that you helped me give your former professor a beating of her life?" Valerie asked. "Yes," Raphael said, "but if Professor is getting in the way of delivering justice, then I will help you get it done, Ms. Valerie," he said. "You can count on me, Enigonitz," Raphael said. "Oh," Valerie said as her wounds are nearly done healing and it's only a matter of time before she recovered. "Really," Raphael said. "We are here for you, Ms. Valerie," he said. "Well, that just warmed my ancient heart, kid," Valerie said. "Thank you," she said as she turned her back away from Raphael. "You're welcome, Ms. Valerie," Raphael said after a moment before she heard his footsteps walking towards the door before the sound of it shutting close follows. She sighed. "I better finish here lest I get attached to them," she muttered to herself, "since an attachment to another person will only make things harder for me," she said as she saw her memories of brighter days and a pain shot up in her heart, a heart that she believed become a stone that won't feel any emotions anymore, no emotions other than anger towards all Agarthans, including herself. "So, we'll respond to her as soon as she cast a spell?" he asked as they walked towards the cathedral. "Yup," Byleth said happily. "Once the spell detected the scavenger of life's signature life force, that's when we will take action," she said. "So, be prepared because we will take action once we have a good grasp of where they are," Byleth said. "Roger that, Your Grace," he said. Byleth shooed him a smile as they walked side by side. He smiled softly to her as he admired her profile. The happy and bright smile and the happiness that is reflected in her eyes can make even the hardest of men to soften and submit to her. Her smile is just so enchantingly beautiful. "Right, he thought as he continued to gaze at her. I want to be stronger for her, he thought, so that I can stay by her side from now on and forever, he thought as he continued to look at Byleth. Clad in the uniform of her office and looking so divine in the morning sun, at some point in time, seeing her wear her vestments would have invoked a feeling of inferiority and it would made him back down and keep his distance from her, but now, it only made him more determined, more eager to be stronger, to be of use for her, to be able to ease anything that would put a burden on her heart, to protect her and her happiness at all costs and to keep that beautiful and mesmerizing smile on her face for always. "Good morning, Miss Sophia," Edwin said as soon as the brown-haired nun came to his line of sight. Clad in her vestments as she walked towards the cathedral for the morning service for both the nuns and monks, and the knights. "Good morning, Sir Eddie," Sophia greeted back as soon as the knight is beside her. "How are you doing this fine morning, milady?" Edwin asked. "Never better, Sophia," said with a rueful smile on her face as she saw Shay and the Archbishop walking together, side by side and looking so happy together. They already made up, she thought as she looked at the bright and soft smile Shay shot at the Archbishop and the happy smile the Archbishop have as she listened to Shay talk. "I have to try harder this time," she thought. "I see that they already made up," Edwin said. "Good for them," he said as Shay and the Archbishop entered the cathedral. Sophia just nods in agreement before she smiled ruefully. "So, are there already?" Valerie asked Raphael. "Ignatz," she asked. "Ready and willing, Ms. Regnus," Ignatz said through the weird device Valerie gave to them. "Good," Valerie said. "I'll conduct a spell now and tell me where a peculiar life force is located," she said. "Got it," Ignatz said. "All right, Valerie said as she cracked her knuckles. "Let's get this over with," she said as she started to chant and unleashed a search spell. "Thou shan't speak of thy name in a conceit dash," Byleth said, only to stop as soon as both of them was hit by that spell again. "Seath," she called out to her right-hand man. "Your Grace," Seath replied, leaving his seat on the pew. "I think I caught a fever today," Byleth said. "Do you mind if you take over the sermon for today?" she asked. "I," Seath said, hesitating as he looked over Byleth. "Please," Seath Byleth said. "But," Seath said. "I suggest you let her go this time," Seath, Suthies said. "But," Seath said. "If my vessel says that she is unwell, then she is unwell," Suthies said. "I, of course, Your Holiness," Seath said with a resigned sigh. "Then," Byleth said as she started to unclasp her cape and remove her crown, "I leave everything to you, Seath," she said as she handed over her cape and crown. "Shay, come on," she said as she started to run towards the exit. He can only scratch his head while laughing a little. "Does it have to happen during service?" "Right behind ya," he said as he followed after Byleth run past him. He have paid no heed to the eyes following them to the exit. "So, we are taking the first move instead, he said as they dashed towards the direction of the audience chamber. "So," Byleth said, "you can sense them too?" she asked as they ascend the stairs towards the second floor. "Yes," he said looking up. "The Star Terrace," he said. Byleth stopped for a moment and gave him a smile and a wink. "You hit the jackpot there," she said. "Well done," Byleth added before she continued their ascent to the third floor. "Thank you," he said as he followed after her. "Ready?" Byleth asked as she puts her hands on the door leading to the Star Terrace. "As always, Your Grace," he said. "Good," Byleth said as she pushed the door open. Standing on the middle of Star Terrace and admiring the blue sky above is the all-too-familiar figure of the old woman he met yesterday. "Oh," the old woman said in delight as soon as she turned her eyes towards them. "I'm so glad to see you again, old friend," the old woman said. "How many millennia has it been, Lady Suthies?" the old woman asked. "Too long, if I may say so myself, old friend," Suthies said. "And this young lady here must be your vessel, I assume," the Old woman said, turning her attention to Byleth. Certainly a beauty just like you, Suthies, she said. It's an honor to finally meet you, your grace, the old woman said. Byleth gave a curtsy. The pleasure is mine, scavenger of life, she said. The old woman smiled in acknowledgement before she turned to him. And I didn't expect you to be here, boy, she said. I was so sure that you wouldn't accompany the archbishop, the old woman said with a smile. But I guess you two made up, she said. That was a mistake I won't repeat anymore, he said. I'll stay and I'll fight by her side no matter what, he said. Thank you, madam, he said with a bow. What for? The old woman asked. For setting me straight, he said. The old woman hummed. Consider it a favor from me, boy, she said. As well as you too, Suthies, Epimans, the old woman said. I guess we could make it even if we return the favor, Suthies said. Consider this as thank you for setting the little twerp straight for my vessel's sake, old friend, she said. The old woman hummed. Though I was curious how this will turn out with these young people, she said. I already checked onto our sleeping beauty, the old woman said. She is a good woman, she said. Try not to hurt her or make her cry, boy, the old woman said. Her? Byleth asked, looking to him and narrowing her eyes as soon as she saw him blush. Suthies, he called out. I thought you already told her about that, he said. I have no idea what you are talking about, twerp, Suthies said before he heard her whistling an out-of-tone tune. Arvel, he called out. You dug your own grave, Arvel said. Now, lay in it, he said. What are you guys being so cryptic about? Byleth asked. Just tell me, I'm not gonna kill or anything, she said. Right, Byleth said with a smile on her face. That's exactly why we are not that keen into telling you, both, Suthies and Arvel said. Now, that I have seen what I have wanted to see, she said, I best on my way now, she said, or I might risk being caught by that battle maniac, the old woman said. So, you want us to stall her long enough for you to have your getaway? She asked. How kind of you to offer such thing, the old woman said before they can feel an activation of spell. Then, the old woman said as she becomes surrounded by gust of wind and leaves and flowers started to fly everywhere before they surround her. I shall meet you in the crossroads of destinies, she said as she faded away from them and the wind settled down. An illusion, he muttered. No, Byleth said. What do you mean? He asked. It's some sort of a multiplier spell, Byleth said, just like the one the Mourner of Atlanta have, but this is an improved version of it, she said. I wonder if I can copy it, Byleth muttered. Probably, he said as he put his hand on her shoulder. But, he said as another spell hit them and he saw a vision of the scavenger of life, on the other side of town. He said. That was fast, Byleth said. It disappeared. Ignatz muttered as soon as the life force appeared on Ethra and disappeared the next. Wait, it's on the edge of town, Ignatz said. What? Valerie asked. But that shouldn't be possible, she said. Wait, Miss Valerie, Raphael said. They appeared on the other side of town, he said. That is too fast even for someone on that geezer's standard, Valerie said. Ms. Regnus, Ignatz said. What? Valerie asked. You say that only life forces and crest signatures appeared on Ethra, right? Ignatz said. Yes, Valerie said impatiently. So, she asked. Well, Raphael said as he observed the signature signs of both the crest of Sethline, Sikal, and Siros, as well as the crest of flame on the crest of Siros and two life force next to the crest of Siros and flames, indicating to both Ignatz and him that Professor have two Agar. Then next to her, before he turned his attention towards the life force on the edge of town, we can see a life force of flowers and leaves as well as the winds, he said. That shouldn't be possible, Valerie said. Only living things with life forces and crest signatures can appear on Ethra, unless, Valerie said before a smile appeared on her lips. Raphael, Ignatz. She called out urgently. Keep an eye on those flowers and leaves and watch where they are going, Valerie said. Got it, Raphael and Ignatz said as both of them followed the life forces head towards a specific location. They are heading towards the fair, Ms. Regnus, Ignatz said. The fair, Valerie said. Got it, she said. What's next after this, Ms. Valerie? Raphael asked. Are we going to fight another Agar then again? Ignatz asked. If so, we are here to help, he said. About that, Valerie said. After the fight with the scavenger of life, I will be leaving town and move on to another, she said. Then, we'll come with you, Raphael said. Absolutely not, Valerie said. I'm a lone wolf, and as a lone wolf, I prefer to fight alone, and this one is an exception, she said. But don't be sad, Valerie said. I might come and visit to eat one of your grub again, kid, she said. Thank you and goodbye, Valerie said. Ms. Valerie, Raphael said. Ms. Regnus, Ignatz said. But there is no answer on the other line. With that they know she is gone. Finally, Valerie said as she glides down towards the fair, I can finally tear you to pieces, she said. Old geezer, she shouted as the fair comes to her sight. How can she be so fast? Byleth asked. A teleportation magic or even a warp magic can't be cast multiple times that fast, and definitely the speed is not that fast for her to teleport from one side of town to another, she said. He observed as he felt the scavenger of life appear on another side of town again. Hey, Suthies, he said. What is it, twerp? Suthies asked. You said that the scavenger of life is a master caster, right? He asked. Yes, Suthies said. What are you getting at, Shay? Arvel asked. Well, if she is indeed a master caster, then maybe this a part of her spell, he said. Byleth looked at him in surprise. Go on, she said, trying to figure what he is saying. All I was saying is, what if she wasn't teleporting? He asked. What if she didn't move at all, but the ones we are feeling all over the place is a dud, a way to dash of the mourner of Atlanta while she leave? He asked. Well, it wasn't out of their based abilities, but if they are sort of decoy, then where do you think the real one is? Arvel asked. Any ideas, twerp? Suthies asked. He started to think. A place, as he recalled, the scavenger of life is a very subtle being that even he didn't sense her until she is close enough to him, a place where no one would suspect. The fair, he exclaimed. A fair? Byleth asked in confusion. I don't recall approving some sort of fair for this month, she said. No, a different fair, he said. The one on that abandoned town, he said. And how would you know? Byleth asked. I just know, he said. Come on, he said as he started to turn towards the staircase. We have to hurry, he said urgently, but when he didn't hear Byleth following after him, he stopped in his track. Your Grace, he asked. I'm going to jump to there, Byleth said, not turning to face him. At this rate, we will be too late even if you used your shadow flash, and your shadow slide is too crucial to waste, she said. So, Byleth said before she mumbled something under her breath. What? He asked. I said, Byleth said. Hold on to me, she said. He blushed at the thought of being so close to her, in a very compromising position. All right, he said as he walks towards her. Forgive me for this, Your Grace, he said as he put his hand on her shoulder. Tighter than that, Shay, Byleth said. Tighter, he asked as he tightened his grip on her shoulder. Like this, he asked. Byleth brushed his hands off her shoulder. When I say tighter, I mean stronger than a hand on a shoulder. She said urgently. G got it, he said as he wraps his arms around her like a harness. More stronger. Byleth said, since I don't want to tear your arms off or throw you off, she said. All right. He said as he tightened his arm around her, hoping that she is satisfied by it. All right, Byleth said as she bent slightly in preparation for the leap, and just like that the ground beneath her was surrounded by small circles of green and white flames. Let's go. She said as she jumped up to the air. Check the description for the links to the author.